which brings the question that I don't think we have addressed really this offseason. We've talked a lot about Kenny Pickett. We talked a lot about Mason Rudolph and our thoughts on him, but we haven't really answered the question. And I don't think a lot of people have answered the question that I think is very important at this time in the offseason, especially when it's so early. Like, we haven't gone to the combine. This is just all assumption. This is just every craze we could possibly come up with. We are talking about, and every media outlet is talking about, every fan is talking about. And that is Kenny Pickett getting a fair shot right now? Like, are we completely blowing past Kenny Pickett and any potential that he has and the possibility that he could turn out to be good? And, do you look at Kenny Pickett and nobody's talking about, does he deserve a third shot? He's 14-10 as a starter. Like, is it time to give up? Is it not time to give up? Like, I don't think that question's really been tossed out there. I think it's all just, what are the alternatives? When you look at Kenny Pickett, when you look at everything that's going on right now, do you think Kenny's kind of getting the fair hand in this? And do you look at him as a guy that maybe it is time to just acknowledge he does deserve a third shot, or does he not deserve a third shot?
I think Kenny's getting exactly what he deserves. I don't know, that sounds a little harsh, but like I think Kenny's going to go into training camp with as much of an opportunity as anyone to play for this starting job. Like, he was a first-round draft pick. Like, they're showing some faith in him, showing some, I don't know, I don't know what the exact word is, but I think by sticking with them to a certain extent and giving him a chance, I mean, the Steelers are just kind of reflecting that, look, this is one of our first-round picks from really recently. We're going to keep some confidence in him for a while. But I think it's been pretty clear from the end of the season that this is kind of the last stand, like this is kind of make or break for him. And I think that's completely fair. And I know, like, we are talking about the alternatives a lot more than we're talking about what kind of potential Kenny has to be good this season. But I think that's because Kenny's the only quarterback on the roster. They're going to get new guys pretty much no matter what, whether or not Kenny ends up playing really well or not, or whether they believe Kenny will play well or not. This is just what happens when you lose. Well, you haven't lost two quarterbacks yet, but you only have one you literally only have one under contract for 2024. So you're going to need someone. You might as well bring in someone who can possibly give you starter reps, who can possibly be a starter for you. So Kenny's just kind of a known commodity at this point, and we're just kind of no conversation you have about Kenny is going to be very fruitful until August, until we actually see him take the field and we see him throw a little bit more, or we see him work in this new offense. It's just going to be a while before we can have a conversation about Kenny that's new, or that we have some new data to work off of.
I agree. I look at Kenny Pickett right now and I just say, when it comes to trying to toss out Justin Fields and Russell Wilson and Kirk Cousins and all these names, it's just because it's where the Steelers are more than where Kenny Pickett is. I think if the Steelers were in a bad spot and they were still developing and, you kind of had to talk them up a little bit, you would look at Kenny Pickett and say, why would you not give him a third opportunity? That just makes a lot of sense. But you kind of looked at last season and you said immediately, there are two major flaws here that are really holding the Steelers back. And that is Matt Canada and the quarterback play. And you hoped that Kenny Pickett improved after Matt Canada left. That wasn't the case, and I don't blame Kenny for that.
I mean, he really only got one game post Canada. I mean, 1.5 usually.
Yeah.
He had the Bengals game, and then
yeah, and then he got hurt. And even so, the Bengals game, he looked good, but you got Eddie Faulkner and Mike Sullivan as your co-offensive coordinator. Like, you're not, I don't think he was I don't think he's ever had I don't think we could ever move on from the fact that he's never had a good OC. And I think we use that as excuses for other players, like Justin Fields, for example. But I think that, again, where the Steelers are, there is an actual sense of urgency. There is an actual sense of, this team can be really good, but you need a quarterback. And if you were missing a center or a right tackle or a wide receiver or an inside linebacker or whatever, you could look at those positions and say, well, you have Spencer Anderson, which I don't know if you saw, because Spencer Anderson, Ray Fittipaldo, Post-Gazette, said that he's a candidate to start at right tackle. Shout out your boy right there. If you looked at other positions and said that is our only position of need, but we have a Spencer Anderson, a Mark Robinson, a Corey Trice, whoever, somebody who, and say these guys were drafted higher, but you have somebody like that where they are coming along, but they're not, there's still some hiccups here. You look at it and you say, all right, well, like, you give him one more year because you work well, but you could win a Super Bowl with a bad right tackle. You could win a Super Bowl with a bad inside linebacker or a bad safety or a bad corner. You could not, and it has never happened, win a Super Bowl with a bad quarterback. And there have been some quarterbacks, but you cannot, like, you just can't win a Super Bowl in today's day and age with a bad quarterback, especially when you got the Kansas City Chiefs and all the things that they do, and you just never know when you're going to be in a gunfight and you're going to have to shoot out with guys like Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes or the 49ers or whoever. Like, you just don't know when that's going to happen. So I think the position just makes that sense of urgency so much higher that, yeah, it's a quarterback. You judge them differently and you judge them a lot more harshly, but that's just the nature of the game. That's where Kenny Pickett's been, and that's where he is right now.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point about just the kind of quarterbacks you're going up against. Like, there's just levels to it, Like, there are plenty of guys who can maybe lead you to a playoff spot, who can maybe win you a game in the playoffs. There are not many that can take you to a conference championship, that can take you to a Super Bowl, and obviously can win a Super Bowl for you. I mean, you look at the quarterbacks in recent years that have won Super Bowls. You go back the last 10 years, it's Mahomes, it's Brady, it's Peyton Manning, it's
Big Ben.
Yeah, Big Ben. I mean, did he win one in the last 10 years?
Oh, no, he has not. No, he has not.
Right, it's a Russell Wilson. It's guys who are, I would say, pretty universally, all of those guys are going to go to the Hall of Fame. That's like not, I don't think that's that hot of a take there. Like, it's just different. Like, it is tough to win a Super Bowl, and it's tough to be a Super Bowl winning quarterback. So just, if that's your goal, you got to aim high, right? Like, sounds kind of self-explanatory, but it just takes a really elite player to win a Super Bowl in this day and age as a quarterback, and to lead a team to a Super Bowl and then eventually win one. So that's why I think that's part of why Kenny Pickett's getting held to a pretty high standard. It's just because this team's goals are high. And that's tough. That's tough for a guy like Kenny to walk into, especially when like you said, the situation has been so unstable for most of his career, but that's like the situation he's in. It's how he's going to get judged, and this team has high expectations, so he's got to either live up to them or he can't be a part of their future.
I agree. And the window doesn't stay open very long, like the window of opportunity closes quickly in the NFL, and you just don't have time to mess around with it. And if this was 2 years ago and they just brought in Arthur Smith, and you were like, oh man, or even last year, they just brought in Arthur Smith, you'd say, this is Kenny's job. You're excited about it. This year, it's like, dude, you saw how good this team could be with Mason Rudolph. How good could it be if you brought in a crazy good quarterback and had a competent offensive coordinator? And because of those questions, you could either take a risk or you can't take a risk. And it sounds like the Pittsburgh Steelers want to take a bit of a risk on Kenny Pickett, and that's their decision. But when it comes to the conversation being had outside of the organization, I think that you acknowledge more strongly that the risk is pretty high. Like, it's not a low risk for how good this team could possibly be. And the goal is Super Bowl, and fans are getting real fed up with not winning the Super Bowl. So that's just where they are. There'll be plenty more. And the combine next week, the draft coming up, free agency is like, 3 weeks away? Something like that. That's wild. And I saw yesterday, I was actually listening, shout out Rich Eisen and Jimmy G. He mentioned that he believes Justin Fields will get traded right at the beginning of free agency. And I agreed with him. I think that could be the window of opportunity for a guy like that, just because you want to trade him before really everybody gets going. If you're the Chicago Bears, that's peak time right there to say, we're not going to let everybody fill up on the Russell Wilsons and the Kirk Cousins and the Mason Rudolphs. We're going to send our quarterback somewhere. It could be rather quickly that the trade market is red hot for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So plenty of action for right now. We'll keep it trucking, but Chad Johnson, man, if you're right, we will have a whole podcast where we apologize to you. So that's on us.